It's hard to believe that after the pandemic, things could get worse for the travel industry, but they most definitely have. Hello everyone, it's Vanessa and welcome back to my channel, and we have a pretty different video today as I share all my thoughts, experiences, and observations on the current sad state of travel, which is far different than the picture most people are painting. So we'll be discussing all those events and situations that are being ignored and swept under the rug that have led to the state the industry currently finds itself in. But please stay tuned till the end because, although it might not look like it now, I truly believe the travel industry has a future, a bright one, and I'll let you know my thoughts on how and why travel will be making a big comeback. Let's begin with marketing, or the lack thereof. If you look at travel marketing pre- and post-pandemic, it's pretty shocking the way it's become almost non-existent, especially the past 18 to 24 months. I actually saw more travel advertisements in 2020 and 2021 than I've seen the past couple of years. Here on YouTube, it's almost non-existent, which certainly hasn't helped us travel channels, and if you see a travel channel where numbers have grown or even remain the same over the past 2 years, they're definitely cheating and buying views. Yeah, it needed to be said. But it's not just social media. TV, streaming platforms, even print media have all cut way back on travel advertising, and that causes a trickle-down effect that goes beyond travel creators to the consumers. When people watch a commercial, see an ad of any kind for a new resort or destination, it causes the consumer to get excited, look that location up, start some planning, and when you take that inspiration factor away from the consumer, you see a lot less travel interest and therefore bookings. But I do see both sides to this. If companies aren't earning the same amount of revenue, the first thing that's cut is always marketing. Now let's talk flights, and there's so much to talk about here. I'm constantly on travel message boards of all types, and the one thing they all have in common is travelers saying that while they can afford most hotels and resorts as prices have come down, what they cannot budget for is the crazy cost of flights, and we'll discuss later what big trend has directly benefited from this. But you see travelers only going to destinations that are within driving distance, which really restricts one's options. And from what I've observed, this is quite possibly the biggest travel change we've seen over the past 2 years. People are unable or just unwilling to pay double or even triple what flights were just a couple of years ago. The other factor, of course, is the concern over the recent airline safety issues that have emerged this year. And while it's not nearly as big of an issue as the cost factor, it's definitely not helping the flight and airline crisis we find ourselves in. So do I think flight prices will come down? Absolutely. I think eventually airlines will have no choice, especially with international flights down as much as they are. But how soon will this happen? That remains to be seen, although I do have some theories. But until that happens, and we're talking significantly cheaper, I don't see the situation improving. The economy, the big elephant in the room that ties into everything we've been talking about thus far. And as it relates to travel, there's no question that for most of us, travel is a discretionary income purchase. It just is. And for most people, not us, but most, it's the last thing on the list of discretionary income purchases. And sometimes we forget that beyond the fun, excitement, and relaxation that travel brings us, it also plays a significant role in the economy of a country, some more than others, creating a substantial amount of both revenue and jobs. So you have a vicious cycle here. As the economy worsens, consumers eliminate travel from their spending, and local and national national economies are impacted. Now, I will say, domestic travel for most countries seems to be doing well, according to travel data, especially travel by car. Europeans are traveling all over Europe, Americans are traveling all over the US. It's international travel specifically, which continues to take a major hit, tying back in with what we just discussed regarding flights. The good news is, when the economy improves, so will travel spending. So it's not a matter of if, but when. Greed. So I know a lot of travelers place blame on travel companies and brands and even countries for prices going up to the extent that they have. And that's across the board for everything these days. But let's talk travel. A lot of people like to forget or ignore the fact that the travel industry was hit the first, the hardest, and the longest of pretty much anything during the pandemic. And many of these companies and even countries remained shuttered from travelers for 2+ years. And all I kept thinking and saying was, the longer they remain closed, the more exponentially that loss of revenue is going to be passed on to the consumer whenever they finally decide to open. And here we are with triple and even quadruple the prices of 2019. Do I think a lot of companies and even countries stayed closed for years because they just assumed that they could make up the loss later by charging much more whenever they opened? Absolutely. Was that right? I'll leave that for you all to comment on. Do I think that they're padding prices with a bit of greed for extra measure? Sure. But I look at travel data every single day, and despite what everyone would like you to think, much of the travel industry is still in recovery mode. So in my opinion, this isn't so much about greed as it is the foolishness of remaining closed for 2 to 3 years and expecting the consumer to shoulder that financial burden. And that is most definitely unfair. Cruising, and more specifically, its rise in popularity over land-based international vacations. Now, I've heard many reasons from recent cruisers. The ship itself is the destination. They prefer the ocean setting. They find they have more activity and entertainment options. But I've also seen the arguments against them. They're not immersive, and you don't experience as much of the area. And more recently, that as cruise prices and extra fees continue to rise, in many cases every 6 months, as we've talked about in detail in the membership, they're no longer the bang for the buck that they once were, especially compared to all-inclusive resorts. But the big thing I keep seeing over and over in cruise message boards goes once again back to flights, and the fact that the average couple can save $2,000 and a family can save several $1,000s by not flying to a land-based international destination and instead driving to a local port, and they can travel internationally without needing to pay for flights. And there's no arguing against the value in that. The big question then becomes, when flights go back down, will cruising popularity remain at these all-time high levels? So now to the ultimate question, is travel doomed? I know I've given a bit of a gloomy picture, but I do believe that travel as a whole, including international travel, will be making a big comeback in the future. I think one thing many of us learned during the pandemic was to value quality experiences and travel more than we used to. And for most of us who've been forced to travel less or not at all due to rising prices, as soon as the economy improves, we'll be back out there enjoying life and seeing the world. So there you have my thoughts, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the general state of travel, and please share your own personal experiences as well. Have you changed type of travel, frequency? And let's try to support and encourage each other as we face difficult times so we can keep looking forward to better things ahead. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye, guys.